involving science?
Yeah, I think there are several ways one can address that question. Let me address it in a consider not long ago when so much of the Western world was the state was the religion. And we have actually moved quite a distance from that compared with 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, the era of the Inquisition and this sort of thing. And so to say that it has such a grip, it has a fraction of the grip that it once did on the operations of human conduct and of society. So the real question is, if implicit in that is, given what we know of science, why would religion still have any grip at all? Not why does it still have a big grip? Because it's not a big grip when you look in the developed world. So, in fact, most of Europe are just, they're whole countries where religion has essentially disappeared entirely. And the countries are not full of violence and, it's just, the assumption that you have to be religious to be moral is a false one. It's empirically false, because you just look around in places where that's the case. So, so that's one fact. And we pull away from that a little. There's plenty of what goes on in religious texts that has tremendous value to how to think about life and how to treat one another. In fact, Jefferson created what was essentially what you can think of as Thomas Jefferson, the Jefferson Bible. I don't know if you ever heard of this. He went through the Bible, and I think both the Old and the New Testaments, and he crossed off everything that was sort of mythical, magical, things that clearly violated known laws of nature, and kept the rest, and said, here is the stuff of the Bible that should have value to any modern person going forward. If you look at people who are religious today, who are not in conflict with science, they have viewed their religious text as a spiritual, something that gives them spiritual support, not as a science textbook. The conflict in society is when you have those who are still religious, who want to use their religious text as their access point to understanding the natural world. And persistent efforts of the past to make that happen have just simply failed. The Bible does not work as a science textbook. In fact, Galileo knew this, and he himself was a religious man. He's famously quoted as saying, the Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. So on that scale, the conflict comes about when that subset of the religious community feels threatened by scientific discoveries that are different from how they interpret what the natural world should be in the Bible.
I think it's that point where you get to the concept of the God of the gaps. You go, we do not understand this, science takes us so far, but we don't understand anything beyond that, therefore, that's God. The stuff that we don't get, that's God. And the trouble with that is the moment that you actually go, no, we do understand that now, is people going, well, did God just go away then? And it goes back, nice simple things like the rainbow. The point where you go, well, the rainbow actually, it's an optical effect. It's not something magic that gets put up in the sky to memorialize the flood.
Plus, did you know that everyone sees a unique rainbow?
No.
That's right. The rainbow is an optical effect for the person who sees it. So if you stand 10 feet to my left, you see a different rainbow than I see. It's a remarkable, fun fact about rainbows.
My favorite fun fact about rainbows is the fact that they were originally believed to have 6 color bands, but that Newton added indigo and violet.
Newton he liked
his 7s.
The number 7. He had a mystical feeling for the number 7. Throws in indigo that no one else sees.
Yeah, hands up here. Who actually goes, indigo, violet, there's the indigo. You don't. You just go purple.
Yeah, exactly.
Blue, purple. But
another thing about the rainbow, because each rainbow is unique to the viewer, it can only be a rainbow that is exactly face on to you. You've never seen a rainbow that was like at an oblique angle. Think about it. They're exactly hemispherical in front of you. That's why you can never get to the base of the rainbow. Because that would mean your perspective on it would change. That's what makes it a good place to hide the gold. Okay? In case you didn't know. All right.
Are you outing yourself here as an unbeliever in leprechauns? People have been burned at stakes for that.
Indeed am. Another thing, you mentioned the God of the gaps. In a free society, a free pluralistic society, where the freedom of the expression of religion is constitutionally protected, which is a fundamental part of why America was so attractive to immigrants from around the world whose religious differences were not being supported in their hometown. I will never be one to tell you what you should believe or what you should not believe. What I will say is that if you want to say that where we don't understand things, that's where God rests, that's where God operates, the God of the gaps argument, because I get asked that all the time. What was around before the universe? I don't know. Must have been something, God. So they got to stick in God where we're not there yet. And I just say, we got top people working on that. It's a current frontier. We're not there yet. And given the history of the moving frontier, where people had previously said, well, God must be operating, we're long past that. Those explanations have come. And so there's no compelling reason to say God did it and then sort of give up and go on to the next problem. My issue with the God of the gaps is that if you feel that way, you should not be writing the science curriculum of a classroom. Okay? That's all. Okay? Because if you do, you are undermining the very process of what science is all about. Because the God of the gaps principle is it's a philosophy of ignorance, whereas science is a philosophy of discovery. And that's an important distinction between the two. And if you remove that foundation for what builds science, you are undermining the capacity of your culture, of your nation, to compete technologically in the 21st century. So it is not without consequence to have conduct of that way.
There's something, Doc, called the Kessler syndrome. Would you explain what that is? Because you could better than I.
Well, I don't know specifically what that is, but the scenario that...
Then I'll tell you.
No, the scenario that was portrayed with total catastrophic satellite failure by one satellite breaking apart, taking out 10 others, and each one taking out 10 others, until the whole space volume is filled with debris, so it takes out everything that's there. That's a real scenario.
The syndrome is that there's so much crap, when it hits another piece of crap, it shatters into many more.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Okay.
No, I thought that's what I just said.
So. I say it happens exponentially. That's what's different in my experience.
Let's look 1 going to 10 going to 100. But okay.
But here's what they're worried about, that there's so much of this that in time it will bring down the satellites.
Yes, it can happen.
And then we could not have cell phones.
No, cell phones operate off of towers, typically.
But don't they bounce it off satellites?
Occasionally, but...
What about texting? That bounces off a satellite. No?
So most of your cell phone traffic is cell tower. But
All right.
Your point is well taken.
Here's what's clear. Bill wants Cuban cigars and he wants a cell phone. That's my takeaway of this whole thing.
The point is, yes, if you shatter a satellite, this is debris moving 17,000 miles an hour, and even chips of paint, if you get hit with them, that's a bad day for you. So yes, it is bad, and they took that to an extreme limit in the movie, and that was one of the truer things represented in the movie.
Right.
Compared with other things like she's a medical doctor repairing the Hubble telescope. Right. I don't think so. Okay? I don't send auto mechanics to operate on your heart. All right? So this was, so I tweeted that, and people got upset with me
So
for
upset. They were upset that...
They went...
Right, but they're okay that George Clooney is a ghost.
Spoiler alert!
Or not.
Yeah,
It was more like a hallucination.
No, that's
Remember?
hallucination.
It's really more
That's
like a
right.
hallucination.
You're right.
That's right. It was her fault, not his.
Right.
He wasn't the real ghost. But here's the point. If the debris is low enough in the atmosphere, it will eventually drop out of orbit because Earth's atmosphere does not have a sharp edge. It just fades to fewer and fewer atmospheric particles. And almost no matter your height, up to several hundred miles, you're going to hit some particles and it'll slowly slow you down. And eventually you drop back to Earth burning up. In fact, we take full advantage of the atmosphere taking you out of orbit for satellites that we want to purposefully take out of orbit. If you take them out of orbit at a particular spot, it'll get lower and lower and plunk down in the Pacific Ocean, the great toilet bowl of satellite debris.
Are we going to be quizzed on this?
No, just
Because I'm not taking notes.
He is
I
so
should be taking notes.
brilliant for a guy who looks like he plays bass in the Jay Giles band. That's all I have to say.
I'm not authorized to answer that question. Where shall I begin? UFO. First, remember what the U stands for in UFO. Now, there's a fascinating frailty of the human mind that psychologists know all about, and it's called argument from ignorance. And this is how it goes. You ready? Somebody sees lights flashing in the sky. They've never seen it before. They don't understand what it is. They say, a UFO. The U stands for unidentified. So they say, I don't know what it is. It must be aliens from outer space visiting from another planet. Well, if you don't know what it is, that's where your conversation should stop. You don't then say, it must be anything. Okay? That's what argument from ignorance is. It's common. I'm not blaming anybody. Psychologists know all about it, and it may relate to our burning need to have to know stuff because we're uncomfortable steeped in ignorance. You can't be a scientist if you're uncomfortable with ignorance because we live at the boundary between what is known and unknown in the universe. Unlike what journalists write. You ever see journalists? Any journalists here? You go to journalists. You go to journalists. All articles about science discoveries begin. Scientists now have to go back to the drawing board. As though we're sitting up in our office, you know, masters of the universe. It's like, oops, somebody discovered something. No, we're always at the drawing board. If you're not at the drawing board, you're not making discoveries. You're something else. So, the public, it appears, seems to have this burning need to have an answer to what is unknown. And so you go from an abject statement of ignorance to an abject statement of certainty. So, that is operating within us. Let's start there. Second, we know, not only from research in psychology, but simple empirical evidence in the history of science, that the lowest form of evidence that exists in this world is eyewitness testimony. Which is scary because that's some of the highest form of evidence in the court of law. But we know from second grade. Where's my guy from second grade? Get up to the microphone for a minute. Grab the microphone. Grab the microphone. In your classes, have you done the famous experiment where you play telephone and you line up all your kids in class and one person starts with a story and then you hear it and you repeat it to the next person and the next person? Have you done that in class yet?
Yes.
You've done that experiment? Because what happens by the time you get to the last person and they retell the story? What happens?
It's like completely different.
It's completely different. Completely different, okay? Because the conveyance of information was relying on eyewitness testimony, which in that case is ear witness testimony. And so, thank you. So we know that. So he knows it. He's in second grade. All right. So, actually he should be in 12th grade as we've established. So now, It wouldn't matter if you saw a flying saucer. In science, even if you have something less controversial than a flying saucer, if you come into my lab and you say, you got to believe me, I saw it, and you're one of my fellow scientists, I say, go back, go home. Go back until you have some other kind of evidence that's not just you saw it. Okay? Because human perception system is rife with all ways of getting it wrong. Okay? But we don't like thinking of ourselves that way. We have high opinions of our human biology when in fact we should not. I'll give you an example of how it reveals itself. We've all bought and enjoyed books called Optical Illusions, right? Well, we all love optical illusions, but that's not what they should call the book. They should call them brain failures, okay? Because that's what it is. It is a complete failure of human perception. All right? All it takes is a few sketches that are cleverly done. Your brain can't figure it out. All right? So, we are poor data-taking devices. That's why we have such a thing as science, because we have machines that don't care what side of the bed they woke up in the morning, don't care what they said to their spouse that day, doesn't care whether they had their morning caffeine. They'll get the data right. Okay? So, maybe you did see visitors from another part of the galaxy. I need more than your eyewitness testimony. And in modern times, I need more than your photograph, which Photoshop probably has a UFO button today. Like, stick it in, right? So, on your computer. So, here's what you do. I'm not saying we haven't been visited. I'm saying the evidence thus far brought forth does not satisfy the standards of evidence that any scientist would require for any other claim that you're going to walk into the lab with. So here's what I recommend. Here's what I recommend. Next time you're abducted, because I'm ready for this. I'm ready. Okay? I get abducted, I'm ready. Okay? So you're there, you're like on the slab, because they always do like the sex experiments on you, on the flying saucer. So there you are, and they're poking at you. Here's what you do. You ready? You tell the alien, you're gonna be an alien for this, right? So you're poking me, all right? So then I say,
finally, I'm on this side of the equation.
Okay, so I say, hey, look over there. And then he looks over there, you quickly like snatch something off the shelf, put it in a pocket, and then lay back, all right? Then you're done, you come back, and you say, look what I got. Okay, I like stole the ashtray off the shelf of the flying saucer. And then you bring that to the lab. And it's not about eyewitness testimony at that point, because you'll have something of alien manufacture. And anything you pull off of a flying saucer that crossed the galaxy is going to be interesting, okay? Because even objects within our own culture. I got this device here, okay, the iPhone. 10 years ago, they would have resurrected the witch-burning laws had you pulled this thing out, okay? And that's in our own culture. Our own culture produced this over a 10-year span. So if there's some technology that crossed the galaxy, that's going to be some serious stuff to look at in the lab. Then we can have the conversation. Until then, I can't, I'm sorry. Go ahead, keep trying to find them. I'm not going to stop you. But get ready for that time you are abducted, because I'm going to be looking for your evidence when that happens. And last point on that is, there are people who look up all the time. Like, for example, the community of amateur astronomers in the world. I was an amateur astronomer. We look up, we come out of a building, we look up. Doesn't matter, we're looking up. UFO sightings are not higher among amateur astronomers than they are in the general public. In fact, they're lower. You say, well, why is that so? Well, because we know what the hell we're looking at. We know. Do you know? I don't. Because we study this stuff. Do you know there was a UFO sighting reported by a police officer, because we think that because you have a badge or you're a pilot or you're whatever, that your testimony is somehow better than that of an average person. It's all bad because we're human, okay? So there was a police officer who was tracking a UFO that was swaying back and forth in the sky, okay, reported on the hot, they're in one of the, what do you call the car? The squad car chasing a UFO, and the UFO's moving back and forth like this, okay? Later it turned out the cop car was chasing Venus, and he was driving on a curved road. But was so distracted by Venus, he thought Venus was the one moving, and he wasn't even thinking that he was doing this. So, I have seen things which, without my background in meteorology and astronomy and looking up, I would have reported to the police department. I would have. Like orographic clouds that form above huge mountains that are circular. And they're above a tall mountain, which means wherever you are, the sun can set for you before it has set for the cloud, darkening the skies, yet the cloud is now illuminated by sunset colors, which are what? Red, yellow, orange, and it's circular. There have been reports of hovering circular UFOs with light beams on them because people are looking at this cloud formation on top of mountains. So, maybe we have been visited by aliens. Maybe they've even landed. But why do they land in like the farmer's yard and not like Times Square, all right? And then I worried, like maybe they had landed in Times Square, but nobody took notice. You know, because that's the really big problem there. And so there's a huge answer to it because there's a lot built into it. So here's another concern I had. Oh, you said about movies earlier? Remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Absolutely.
Remember that? And the aliens come in this big flying saucer?
Sure.
Okay, and what do? We turn on runway lights for it. I'm thinking, flying saucers don't need runway lights. They're flying saucers, for goodness sake. If you put a bullseye or something.
You didn't need them when we landed on the moon.
Don't put runway lights for this thing. Then, when you go to Roswell and there's like crashed flying saucers, I'm thinking, if the alien came across the galaxy and couldn't land a damn spaceship, I don't want to meet the aliens. They're stupid aliens, all right? You at least land on Earth, for goodness sake. Don't tell me you came across the galaxy, you can't land on Earth. Go home. Bring me somebody who can, then I'll have the conversation. Anyhow, so those are my opinions on the subject. I'm sorry.
I have a question next for Neil Gaiman, and it goes like this. You may live one day in the life of any one person in history. Who do you choose? When in their life do you choose your day? And what do you do during this day?
You know, John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester, was probably the finest of the Restoration poets, and was lost to posterity very, very quickly, because most of his poems were obscene. He died in his early 30s of a venereal disease, and having roistered his way through the early part of the reign of Charles II, getting up late, having incredible amounts of sex, and writing a ridiculous amount of poetry. I would like to be somebody who lived next door to Mr. Rochester.
You could have just said Tolkien and just left it at that, but no. Miri, how about you?
That was great.
Is there someone that you would like to be or have been for a day?
A tree. It's true.
A tree where there are no dogs around. Yes.
I was always obsessed with trees.
Conifer.
Give us kinds. Weeping willows.
A weeping willow.
A weeping willow. Yeah. An ever weeping willow.
I was going to ask you, what you would do during that day, but I mean...
I would weep and I would willow.
Photosynthesize, possibly?
Neil, how about you?
I got to follow the tree. And so I do have a case. But before I give the answer,
sure.
I feel compelled, the educator in me is compelled to comment that this poet, who you said died of some combination, likely, of venereal diseases, I just want to say that in astrophysics, we have a vocabulary of what you are called if you are from one planet or another. If you're Earth, you're an Earthling. Mars, you're Martian. You're Venus, you're Venusian, this sort of thing. And it turns out that we got to that exercise later than we should have, because the actual genitive form of what it is to be a Venus is venereal. And the medical doctors, upon seeing a disease peculiar to those who are sexually active, decided to name it of the goddess of love and beauty and all that goes with it. So venereal diseases are in fact named after Venus. When we decided to come up with names from being from different planets, we couldn't then say, if you're from Venus, you're venereal, because that just doesn't work anymore. So we then invented out of whole cloth Venusian. We just invented that word, but it's actually venereal.
This is...
Okay?
The reason you pay money to come to the forum is you can't see this sort of shit on YouTube.
Okay.
I mean, he doesn't do that.